Every Gen X kid had a sick day that went almost exactly the same way. The same TV, the same soup, same specific blanket on the couch. And if you grew up in the 80s, I'm going to walk you through every single moment of it because I guarantee yours looked exactly like mine. This is the anatomy of an 80s sick day. It all started the night before, or maybe that morning with the performance. A groan, a pale look, the hand on the forehead, and if you were serious about it, the thermometer, because nothing sold it like a number. The problem with the thermometer was a glass tube, silver mercury liquid, and you had to hold it under your tongue for what felt like a decade while your mom timed it. Rumor has it that some kids held it up to a light bulb, some held it near a cup of hot tea. You're trying to land somewhere around 99, maybe 100, because anything over 101, and suddenly there was a talk of a doctor, and that changed everything. You didn't want a doctor, you wanted Bob Barker. The other thing you had to calibrate was your symptom level. Too healthy and you got sent to school. Too sick, your mom called out of work and stayed home with you, which defeated the entire purpose. You were aiming for a very specific window. Sick enough to stay home, not sick enough to warrant supervision. It was harder to hit than it sounds. Most of us nailed it. But getting your mom out the door was only half the battle, because once she left, the real sick day began. And the first hour was unlike anything you'd experienced all year. Your dad was already gone. He left before you were even awake. Your mom got you set up on the couch, pillow from your bed, that one specific blanket, TV tray already unfolded, and then she had to leave. She'd write a note and put it on the kitchen counter with her phone number for work and instructions you most likely didn't read. And then the door closed. If you grew up in the 80s, you know that quiet. It was different from any other quiet. The house had a different smell during the day. The light came through windows at angles you'd never seen because you were always at school when it looked like that. The refrigerator hum was loud. The neighbors were all at work. You were 8 years old, you were alone, and for about 45 minutes it felt like freedom. But that freedom had a very specific shape to it, and it started with whatever was on TV. Which, if the timing was right, was the single greatest thing an 80s kid could stumble into on a Tuesday morning. The television was the whole event. I remember we had channels 4, 5, and 7, and that was ABC, NBC, and CBS. And then we had channel 9, and that was really boring history stuff. It was like PBS, I believe. And then channel 11, I think, was a local station that we had. And then when things got really exciting, we eventually got channel 13. And channel 13 had old movies. It would show like the original Star Trek, Planet of the Apes, Journey to the Center of the Earth, Shark Week, Clint Eastwood movies, and stuff like that. But there was no remote control at the time. You physically got up to change it, which felt like too much effort, and you were supposed to be sick. So you committed to whatever was on. You never got up to change the channel. And in the morning, that was The Price is Right. Bob Barker was the patron saint of Gen X sick day. That theme music, his voice, the beautiful women, the showcase showdown reel. If you grew up in this era, hearing that sound still does something to you. I remember being terrible at this game because they had to guess the price of cars or appliances or cleaning products. I knew the price of a candy. I could tell you exactly what a licorice rope would cost or Charleston Chew candy bar, stuff like that, but that was never on the show. After The Price is Right, the morning got complicated. The soap operas started. And as a kid, you had no idea what was happening. Everyone on these shows was either having an affair, coming back from the dead, or both. Typically, if I wasn't lazy and wasn't drowsy and got up to go to the bathroom, I would change the channel. A core memory for me one time was getting up, turning it to Channel 9, the boring channel that had classical music and literature and history. They actually had the movie Pumping Iron. Pumping Iron was a late 70s documentary where Arnold and the bodybuilders were getting ready for one of the Mr. Olympias. I remember it because I was maybe 9 or 10 at the time, and it made me want to lift weights. I thought it would be really cool to look like that. Little did I know that that wouldn't happen as quickly as I thought it would. I do remember watching that and just being blown away. Like, it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. It made me want to get a set of weights. And back then in the late 70s, early 80s, it was those plastic weights. You'd get that little barbell and you'd get the plastic weights that would kind of crack if you dropped them. But I remember that all stemmed from a sick day watching the movie Pumping Iron, the documentary. And it's kind of crazy to think that I went on to become a fitness writer for 20 years. So maybe my career started as a result of a sick day. But remember, we didn't have a remote control, so I'm watching Pumping Iron on Channel 9. And the problem was I can't get up if like the electric company or Zoom comes on. Remember Zoom? They were going to teach us to fly high. I'm still mad they never did that. Anyway, when Zoom comes on or Sesame Street, when you're like, 10 or 11, like I said, that's a good time to fall asleep because you don't want to, again, when you're like 5 or 6 or 7, those shows are awesome, but at some point you outgrow them. So we're going to zoom. That's a good time to fall asleep. But the TV was only part of a sick day. There was a whole other ritual happening in the kitchen that every single one of us went through. The food situation was locked in before your mom even left the house. So the real food was Campbell's chicken noodle soup. Not homemade, the can, with the tiny noodles that turned to mush if you let it sit too long. It came out of a pot on the stove into a bowl onto the TV tray, and you ate it while watching something you didn't fully understand. And it was funny because my parents' generation, they really believed that ginger ale would like cure your stomach issues or, make you feel better if you were sick. So it was always ginger ale. It was the only time we had ginger ale too. And then there was always a stack of saltine crackers sitting on the TV tray next to the soup. I actually like these quite a bit, and if you were lucky, there'd be a block of cheese in the refrigerator, and you'd slice off super thick chunks of cheese, and you'd have a serious cheese to saltine cracker ratio if you were lucky. Typically, after eating lunch, if I was feeling better, which I always was, and I was never that sick to begin with, I'd raid the pantry. We had all sorts of good things to eat, like Pop-Tarts and powdered donuts. Nothing but processed food. It was awesome. But my dad especially wanted us to take Robitussin. So there was like that cherry flavored Robitussin, or there was like a yellow one. I don't even know what the yellow one was supposed to be, but it was sick. My throat closes up even just thinking about the flavor, and I sometimes have a hard time eating like a cherry flavored anything because of that cherry flavored Robitussin was just so gross. You'd take a spoonful of it and it was kind of just hot going down, like it warmed your stomach up. I think it made me feel worse. And then we had that baby aspirin. That actually tasted great. It was almost like candy, which is probably not good because I remember getting one of those and wanting more. Can I have another one? Even though I didn't need it. They're kind of chalky but delicious. And somewhere in every 80s household, there was a specific Tupperware bowl. It was like Harvest Gold or Avocado Green. On movie nights, it held popcorn. On sick days, you sat it next to you on the couch for an entirely different reason. You know what I'm talking about. That bowl has its own entry into the Gen X collective memory. That thing was legendary. And sometime around noon or 1 o'clock when you had all your food and you were done eating, the freedom turned into boredom. The first 2 to 3 hours were genuinely great. TV, no responsibilities, comfortable on the couch. You felt like you got away with something. By noon, the walls started closing in. By 2 in the afternoon, you were running whatever the independent station was running in syndication. The Munsters, the Banana Splits, shows that only existed in this weird daytime purgatory that you only ever saw when you were homesick. And around 3 o'clock, you'd hear the bus coming down the street. You'd look out the window and watch the other kids get off, your sisters, your neighbors. You heard that muffled noise of kids laughing and having a good time. And the whole world outside was showing up at your door like nothing had happened. You'd been on the couch for 6 hours. The TV tray was still there. The plate with cracker crumbs and where you ate your cheese was still there. You had like a half-empty glass of melted ice and ginger ale. And you had about 30 seconds to remember whether you were supposed to still look sick. Because if you sold it too well, then day 2 was mandatory, and you're missing school, to be honest. Your mom wasn't sending you back after 1 day, and worse, you might even have to go to the doctor, so you had to look just sick enough. I don't know why I remember those days as fondly as I do. The TV was bad at times, the food was bland, and by 2 o'clock I was staring at the ceiling. But there was something about having the whole house to yourself on a Tuesday that felt like a gift. The quiet, the soup, Bob Barker in the morning, it was its own little world for a day. Some days I kind of miss it.